Hey guys, I thought I would show you how I made this charcoal portrait recently. I started out using a Sofft palette knife, which is basically just a sponge tip dipped in charcoal powder to block in the major shapes, before I moved to a charcoal pencil where I get to be more exact and refine the shape of the facial features. I have my reference material off to the left, and I'm looking at it constantly throughout this whole process. You'll also see me using a paintbrush to wipe out some of the lines that I've made. And this is because I want things to be nice and soft at this point, as I'm still going to be building up the shape and values as we get further into this portrait. Here I continue to refine the face a little bit more, double checking my proportions, trying to get things as correct as they can be, before taking that same Sofft palette knife to block in most of the value of the piece. Then I take a kneaded eraser and I pull back where some of the highlights are on the upper plane of the cheek, as well as the forehead and the whites of the eyes. Welcome back as we continue on with this charcoal portrait. Did you know that different types of charcoal sit on the paper differently? Take fine charcoal, for example. This kind goes on the paper very loosely and is easily erased, which is great for a quick sketch, but not if you're trying to build deeper tones on top of it. When I go to work on top of it with my pencil here, I'm actually scraping off just as much of the vine charcoal as I am adding the pencil charcoal. With that in mind, you'll know why it was a mistake for me to start the hair here with vine charcoal. It seemed like a fast way to block in the dark hair tone, but I end up brushing it off and trying again later. Anyway, for now I begin to build up the value of the face using layers of black and white charcoal. Notice that I try to make my marks follow the form, and I'm still using a brush to soften the layers of value I put down. Which sounds like I know what I'm doing, but in all honesty there's plenty of self-doubt at this stage. I'm hoping it'll come together, but I can only trust in the process. Just keep referring back to your reference and take it slow. Alright, we're making real progress now, but I haven't shown you guys the reference photo I'm using. My goal isn't to recreate the photo per se, but to use it as direct inspiration for the expression I want to capture. Here I further flesh out the neck, clavicle, and ear. This is where understanding anatomy can be very helpful. In knowing the basic forms of the neck muscles and collarbones, I'm able to better understand what's happening in my reference to apply to my drawing. I continue pushing my values a bit harder, meaning adding darker shadows and brighter highlights, and begin to put in more detail in the eyelashes, nose, and lips. When thinking about hair, save the individual strands for last, and think in terms of clumps or the general movement of the hair. You'll notice I also sharpened my pencil with a utility knife so that it has a longer tip, allowing me to work longer without needing to sharpen it every 5 seconds. And here's our progress for now. The hair is blocked in well, but I've noticed some issues in the alignment of the eyes, which we'll fix next. Alright, welcome back. As mentioned last time, it was here that I noticed the eyes were just slightly off, so we'll fix that in a second. If you struggle with proportions, try taking a picture of your work and flipping the canvas horizontally. This sort of resets your brain and will help you to see where things might be off. The more often you do this, the faster you'll be able to catch your mistakes. So I lower the iris of the eye on the right just a bit, and after a few tweaks to the face, I then take a paper blending stub and go over the hair for 2 reasons. 1, it helps me fill in the spots where the paper might be showing through my lines. And 2, it compacts the charcoal I laid down, so the darker pencil I add next will go on smoothly. Which I do now, reinforcing the shapes of the hair clumps and indicating which portions flow back in shadow. You'll also notice I use what's called a Mahl Stick to prevent my hand from smearing across the drawing, which brings us to this point. Next, we'll be finishing the hair and tackling the background. Okay, I say it's about time we finish up the hair, but before we do, let's talk about the different hardnesses of charcoal. You may see charcoal labeled as soft, medium, hard, or using a grading system like 2B, 4B, or 6B. In that case, the higher the number means the softer the charcoal, and the darker it will lay down. Here you can see how this looks on the toned paper I'm working on. White charcoal is a little different though, in that it usually only comes in one softness, and my use of it changes depending on my subject. So here I go over the hair with a 6B charcoal to reinforce the darkest values of the hair. Then I take my hardest charcoal and go over the hair once more, and blend between the midtones of the hair and the darkest shadows. It's only after all this that I'll bring out the white charcoal to add highlights to the hair. This goes on super easily, so I'm barely applying any pressure at all. With highlights, less is often more, so I'm careful not to overdo. And that does it for the hair. Next, we'll bring the whole project to a close. Okay, time to finish this portrait up, and to do so we need to address the background. The background should be used to make your subject stand out, and right now the background is too close in tone to the majority of the face. To fix this, I want to make the background lighter to differentiate it from the midtones of the skin. So I begin to add white charcoal into the background. I use a cross-hatched pattern and don't blend it out, which will serve as a nice contrast to the smooth texture of the face. I also developed the dark shirt she's wearing, which will help to balance out the piece by having another area with dark values besides the hair. Lastly, I do a final detail pass, adding some individual hairs on the eyebrows and head. From here, I'll photograph the work and correct the values digitally, and you can also pop the image into Photoshop if you notice any adjustments that need to be made, but try not to go overboard. Thank you all so much for joining me in this process. I'm just starting to explore this form of content, so let me know what type of videos you'd like to see, and if you have any questions about this charcoal process.